All right, let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. Welcome to yet another Finance and Operations Committee meeting. We'll jump right into the agenda, the first of which are the information only items. Were there any comments or questions related to any of those items? All right, hearing none. I had none on those either. So let's move into the abstracts. The first is expanded support, the LEAP grant. Ms. Joseph Lumpkin. Or Mr. Tabares?
No, go ahead, start.
We are very excited to present the LEAP grant to adopt that acronym because
All right. I'm trying to hear. Oh, I see. Ms. Joseph Lumpkin, you're there. I see. Okay. I was trying to figure out who was talking.
yes,
please.
Just makes sense. Can you hear me?
A little hard to hear you.
Okay. Let's try. Okay, try talking straight here.
Good afternoon again. Can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly.
Okay. So I'm very excited to present this grant. It is the Learner Engagement and Attendance Program. I tend to read out the acronyms so that we don't confuse it with the other LEAP in New Haven, which is Leadership Education Athletics Program. This grant allows us to actually achieve a substantial part of our Path to Excellence efforts, which is to deepen and strengthen our relationship with families, and specifically to allow us to grow home visiting. CSDE is granting us funds that will allow us to pay for after school time, meeting with families, visiting with families from a strengths-based perspective. It is a very specific approach. It's not your father's home visiting where we show up based on truancy. This home visiting program is intended to build relationships with our families using a very specific model and engaging with families in a way that helps us to better understand not just their needs or the barriers that they're facing, but also to understand their aspirations and their strengths and their goals to achieve student success. So the funds, as I said, will be used to pay for staffing, for additional training, as well as for appropriate contractors who we've had a success record with. And we will be parsing that out very carefully before we bring those recommendations back to you. But we're very excited that the state has recognized the work that we've been doing around home visiting and has decided to expand our efforts.
All right, thank you. Looks like President Rivera.
Yeah, I just had a question. What does the acronym stand for again?
Learner Engagement Attendance Program.
Oh, got it. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, and my only question, is this a new grant for this year, or is this a continuation or another iteration of a funding we've had previously for this?
Yes, we were funded previously as an exploratory, on an exploratory basis, and based on what we were able to accomplish this past year, they have expanded the grants this year.
Well, that sounds like success in those efforts. So thank you very much for this. And we'll move right into abstract 3.2, which is the Youth Service Prevention Program Grant.
Yes. And Christian is on, and I want to make sure this is the grant that is assigned to Obama School. And again, this is a grant that is targeted for Obama School. We've accomplished this grant with the support of our state representative, Walker. And this really helps us to expand our after-school programming at an early grade school, giving them extra support, extra opportunities to support students' learning. As we have done over the summer, we'll be working very closely with the academic office to ensure that our programming and after school are well aligned. And so we're excited that Obama has received this set of targeted funds based on our past work with them and through the State Office of Youth Services.
All right, thank you. Any comments or questions on this item? Hearing and seeing none, I had none either. So thank you for the presentation and for seeking, and even more importantly, getting these funds. We'll move on to 3.3, which is the Head Start Expansion G1 grant. Ms. Derwin?
Good afternoon. This grant is an expansion grant which allows the Head Start program to fund a classroom at the Lincoln Bassett School. And the money is used to fund the teaching team. It supports the lead teacher, the full-time teaching assistant, and the 2 part-time staff members at the school.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions related to this? I had none either, so thank you. And we'll go ahead and move on to item 4.1 and memorandum of understanding with IRIS, the Integrated Refugee and Immigrant Services Group. Ms. Haxey?
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you. This is very exciting. We have a number of students coming into our high schools, especially at Cross and Hill House, who speak Pashto as their heritage native, but in many cases, they haven't even been, some of them have not even been exposed to reading and writing at all in their heritage language. And those who have also had interrupted education, so they do not have a solid foundation in their native language. And therefore, that sort of prevents them from really grasping English as they learn it here. And also it prevents them from doing well on the Seal of Biliteracy test, which, as we know, can get them various credits and things in college. So IRIS was kind enough to offer to completely pay for a part-time person to teach a class we're calling Pashto Native Heritage Speaker, like we have for Spanish speakers in the schools. And so they're paying for everything. And I just wanted to do this MOU to sort of lay out the agreement, though, because this person will be working with students and need access to PowerSchool and things like that. And so we're going to go through all of those background checks and whatnot, but I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of it.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions related to this? I guess my question is, so this is a new arrangement. Have we been doing anything up to this point for part-time Pashto language instructor or?
No, we've had Pashto tutors that were helping kids learn English, but this is our very first time to pilot, and I think we're probably the first, certainly in Connecticut, if not in the country, to pilot having it taught as a native heritage language, such that students can, if you've never really learned to read and write, it's very hard to then apply reading and writing skills to learning a new language. So we really see how this could be a real benefit, and plus it would be a great place for these kids to come together, be with someone who already speaks their language, and be able to talk about things in their language that are happening in their school, happening in their community, as almost a way for them to also address their social emotional state.
All right. And I'm just guessing on this, but I'm assuming that a certified teacher who is also fluent in Pashto is probably a shortage area.
Good guess. Yeah, this will not be a certified person, but actually it is someone who was doing some tutoring. Someone we're looking at right now is someone who was doing some tutoring for us last year and who also has experience teaching in Afghanistan.
Okay.
And will probably help that person to go through the certification process, at some point, as we usually try to do.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I had no further questions. This sounds very like a good arrangement. We'll move on into the agreements. The first one, 5.1, an agreement with ACES for support and management of the arts program at Betsy Ross. And this is Ms. Bonanno.
Hi, good evening. So I'm here this evening to present the agreement for ACES with Betsy Ross and Co-op. As you'll see within the agreement, we are contracting with ACES, as we historically do, to help to provide the arts consultants to the school program. This supports ensuring that we are providing the electives for each of these school programs. Additionally, there's an extra service this year in Scope C, where ACES will work with us to help fund the internship coordinators to match students in our magnet high schools and across the district to internship opportunities related to the school's theme. So ACES will support us in that as our state appointed RESC.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions? My question was just, so this agreement, we've been working with them for these services for several years now. And I'm just kind of curious as to how this type of arrangement is evaluated in terms of, since these are not employees of the school district, I'm just kind of curious as to how that process goes to make sure that everybody's in sync in the building and the district and at ACES.
Certainly. So at each of the schools, there is a point person for each of the schools that works directly with ACES in terms of the human resources, the contracting, et cetera. And they are working on a regular basis. Myself, as the person who oversees the program at both schools, meets with ACES on a regular basis to have a check-in to ensure that all of the staffing needs are being met. We meet about the budget to ensure that we're within the budget, that the programming is happening. That happens usually quarterly, and a longer one for the planning meeting. So we just had the meeting to talk about the contract that I am presenting to you this evening. In terms of an actual evaluation, we do not evaluate ACES as the actual partner in this. What we work to evaluate is the staffing and the support that ACES gives within the school. So there have been instances where we have not been able to move forward with certain supports that were put in place, but that gets worked out directly with the point people at each of the schools. So ACES, because they're the service provider, they're not the ones actually in the building supporting the programs.
All right, thank you very much. Hearing nothing else on this item, we'll move on to 5.2, agreement also with ACES. But this is educator preparation program. So Dr. Robles.
Good afternoon. I am actually here presenting the proposal with Rosalind Diaz. So I'm going to defer to her since she worked directly with the abstract of the plan. Okay.
Hi,
Thank you.
sure. Good afternoon. ArcTel, actually, we've been using it for a couple of years. It's an advanced educator education program approved by the Connecticut State Department of Education, and it's developed by ACES to ensure that teachers can become cross-enrolled in TESOL and bilingual. It is a shortage area, and teachers actually complete the program, and they also have to pass some standardized testing so they can get cross-enrolled, which will help us also build capacity within the district.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions? I'll just channel my inner Dr. Yarbrough and say thank you very much for including the evaluation materials in terms of the number of people that have been gone through the program last year and participant feedback. That's always appreciated when that is attached to these. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
All right, then we'll move on to 5.3, which is an agreement with Cornell Scott Hill Health Center for a school-based health and dental clinic at Mayo School. Ms. Derwin.
Yes, this is an agreement with Head Start and Cornell Scott to staff and equip the school-based health clinic at the Dr. Mayo School. The clinic serves the Head Start students as well as the special ed students located at the school, and can also service the other Head Start students in the satellite sites. They help us with well child care, sick child care, and preventative measures such as immunizations, flu clinics, etc.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions?
Yes, it was close. Yes. It's too
Dr. White, you're not muted.
Sorry.
So the only question I had is, so I know this is, I'm trying to remember, this is the third year we've worked with them, or the second? Trying to remember when this.
I think it's actually the 4th year.
Time flies.
Yes.
And I have noticed just as in my work with the Head Start task force, the it's much easier to stay in compliance with all the requirements of Head Start for the health monitoring and things with this being in place. So seems to be working successfully. So
yes, it is a big support to the program and to our compliance. And they also support with some of the connections with the visiting dental teams as well.
Because this is one of those areas where students would have to be removed if they didn't have all the health checks and things in place, or so it was causing issues in terms of enrollment and children's attendance to the program. So, all right, thank you. Hearing nothing else on this, we'll move on to 5.4, an agreement with Northwest Investment Consulting. Mr. Carter.
Yes, this agreement is for consulting services to provide administrative services for local 3429 paraprofessionals money purchase plan for the current fiscal year. There was an additional 36% increase due to the number of participants and the additional administrative costs with participants and transactions. This has been the only increase since the plan started in 2022, but due to the interest, the number of participants and therefore the number of transactions has increased. So we support this contract.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions related to this? And my only question is, how did we select this vendor? Was this one that I imagine the local 3429 has input into this in the district as well? I'm just kind of trying to recall how we.
According to my records, yes, and I'll verify, but from documentation left to me by the COO and the chief of staff, they prefer this plan.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Hearing no other questions on this, we'll move on to 5.5, which is an agreement with Labas Consulting. Dr. Robles?
Thank you. So this agreement is actually for Dr. Lavas to continue providing us with professional development, support, technical support in implementing and actually making changes to our bilingual and ESOL program. Dr. Lavas worked with the department last year to conduct a program review, and we have actually a report from her with the findings from the program, and we would like her to continue working with us in providing professional development and support to administrators and teachers. Would you like to add anything else, Rosalie?
Everything's great. For the technical support, continuing to provide some designing in the program as well.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions related to this one? So my question was, one is just a small one, and that is in the answer to question 10D. We prefer that you add all the names of it just says that the selection committee or the group that selected the vendor was the ML team. So I imagine that's the multilingual learner team. We would prefer that you just add the actual names of the people. Yeah. And the reason for this is just, you know, we're just looking in case somebody knew of conflicts of interest. We just like to see who's actually doing the selecting or evaluating the bids that come in. So if that could happen moving forward, the question I had is I did look at because we had this, as you mentioned, the agreement last year. This is the kind of agreements I personally like to see. You know, we work with a consultant, they do some work, they do some training. And then if we're going to work with them again, it's for a lesser amount of money. Last year was 50,000, this year is 30. And so my question is, are we going to continue this progression, do you imagine, where we're learning, this year is going to be one of training the trainer and getting everybody up to speed, and then maybe moving on from this vendor?
And that is correct, Mr. Wilcox. What we're trying to do this year is utilizing the information Dr. Lavas provided to us last year. Right now, we're going to create a series of professional development and technical support to build capacity within the school administrators, and also, central office school administrators and also teachers to equip them with, again, strategies, and also to help us work on creating clarity on the bilingual and ESOL models that we have in the district, and making sure that everyone actually has a clear definition of what is expected for each of the programs, and then of course build capacity. So we may need her next year, but we may not, depending on the outcomes of this year.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. And hearing nothing else on this one, we'll move on to 5.6, an agreement with Southern Connecticut State University. And this is Ms. Natalino.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. It's exciting to be here finally at the point to present the agreement for BioCity, which is one of our newest career connected pathways. Students will be taking classes at 101 College Street, and the two science courses they will be taking this year are chemistry 120 and 121, so semester 1 and semester 2, with Southern professors. And these courses will be 4 college credits each. So that is what this agreement is that is before you.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions related to this? And so this is in the new space. I think I just read about this relatively recently.
This is in the incubator space of biolabs on 101 College. So students, it will follow an ECA model where they'll be transported after third block over to 101 College Street. They'll be taking advanced science and math. Our math course is actually going to be taught by a New Haven public school teacher who's been approved by Southern. So it's the concurrent model, but the science courses will be taught. There's a lecture and a lab So they'll have a lecture course on Mondays and Wednesdays and a lab on Fridays with a different professor.
Okay. Well, sounds like fun.
Mhm.
And I always appreciate the work the district does in having kind of these dual credit type situations where they're getting high school credit for something and then also being able to get some college credits.
Yep.
As someone who works at a university, it helps demystify the process that yes, you too can go to college because you've already done some college.
Exactly. And they'll have 11 college credits this year as juniors, and they'll still have a whole nother year next year. So they'll be,
So,
they'll pretty much have a year of college done by the time they finish with biopsy.
that's great. All right, thank you very much. Hearing nothing else on this, we'll go on to 5.7, which is an agreement with Excel Academy. Also, Ms. Natalino.
Yes, so we are bringing Excel Academy into our schools to teach CNA during the school day. To date, we have about 94 students who have gone through CNA as an after-school experience with Southern Connecticut State University. So this year, based on the amount of students who have been interested and our Health Career Academy pathway, which is building in CNA as an industry certification, we are bringing it into Cross Career and Hillhouse. And we have worked out with Excel Academy that all Cross Career and Hillhouse are on the same schedule so that we can share staffing for this program.
Okay, thank you. Comments or questions related to this? The questions that I had was, I think we've used this vendor before, at least across. So I did go and look at previous agreements. It looks like the pricing hasn't changed too much. It remains the same $1,100 per student, but this is adding an $138 to cover the certification exam, which I think is a great addition. That's a pretty big chunk to come up with. So building it in. My questions were twofold. One is, I'm assuming this is an effective vendor because they're you all are selecting them, and I know that they do this not just in the schools, but on their own in the state. My question is just around the charging. Is this, so this is not to exceed. And so for using that, for example, the testing, if all the students don't take the test, do we still pay for all the tests? Or is this a, we're billed for the actual people that take the coursework and take the test?
So how we decided to work it, Mr. Wilcox, is that if a student didn't take a test, the funds would be there so that if a student needed to take the test again, we'd have access to those funds. So we worked it in per student, but if a student decides that they're not going to continue, they're not going to assess, then we know there'll be money to cover a student who may need to take the test a second time.
Okay. And then a related question is, so this is up to 150 students across
So
these
it's
three.
50 for each school.
Right. So across these three schools. So if, for instance, we don't have, like, I don't know, is 50 more than in each school more than meets the demand, or is there going to be a waiting list? And if so, or do we, if we only have 20 in each school, do we pay for all 50 at each
So
school?
that's a really good question. And yes, we will be paying for 50, but based on just our juniors who are now seniors who showed interest last year, we had over 40 at Cross and Hillhouse. And in addition to that, we're really pushing this so that it's a junior year course. Rationale being that CNA is an entry level position in the healthcare field, but if students become certified junior year, they'll be more prepared to go into EMT if they choose senior year, or to go into work and be exposed to other careers in the health career field as seniors. So for this year, we're going to do a senior class and a junior class, knowing as we build this pathway out, and with the pathway, it's built into their plan, that juniors will be taking CNA that are in the health career pathway. So I think 50 is actually not enough based on the number of students that have expressed interest. And remember, they can be 16 and get certified. So there is even opportunity for some sophomores to take this course if we choose.
All right. Well, my request is what you all will be doing anyways, tracking this as it goes. And then if you all are going to want to go with this next year, being able to have as part of the package, the information about how many people it went through. And
yeah, definitely. And so, what something I learned recently is if they go through this course they can work even if they don't pass the certification exam for 120 days. And so they can be hired pending certification, and then the agencies really help them to get back connected to take that test. So that's just this class alone will have them have access to employment even if they don't pass both exams.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hearing nothing else on this, we'll go on to 5.8, in agreement with ACES for 2 board certified behavioral analysts, etc. Ms. Jackson?
Yep, this is an agreement with ACES, as you mentioned, for 2 board certified behavioral analysts and 3 behavioral specialists. Again, these folks primarily work within our specialized program, servicing students with autism spectrum disorders. But we also do utilize from time to time our board certified behavioral analysts to really help us with behavioral programming for students with more complex needs.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions for this one? Hearing none, I had none either. We'll go on to 5.9, an agreement with Infinity Music Therapy. Ms. Jackson.
Yep, this is essentially music therapy that we provide specifically for our specialized classrooms. It gives an opportunity. The students that I'm referring to, for the most part, are students with little or no language, students who have a lot of very complex needs, that we utilize music therapy in those classrooms. So again, this is just like you've heard me talk about adaptive physical education. This is another specialized service that we provide for our highly specialized special education serviced classrooms.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? I had none either, other than just thanks for this and the previous, including the evaluation information. Move on to 5.10, which is Lifeline Cares. Ms. Jackson?
This is an agreement. I think I've mentioned before that we've had an increased need of students who are coming in that require one-to-one nursing. So again, this is an agreement with a Lifeline who has been assisting us with such support.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? I had none either. We'll move on to 5.11, which is an agreement with Corporate Translation Services. Ms. Haxey?
Yes, thank you. So we're changing translation companies this year. At the end of each year, I do an evaluation where I send out a survey to the PPT chairs. This is mostly for special ed translations, this one. And as you saw come through earlier, we also have the other phone and translation service that is more for parent contact, and we pay for that with Title IV-A services. This one we pay for with general funds and a combination of other things throughout the year. But this is primarily for special ed meetings, etc. We had some issues last year with Bay State, who we had all year, and I personally found them to be very difficult to work with when it came to invoicing, and they were sending us invoices late, and it was just a mess and made it very difficult for our accounting. So we're trying a different service. They're all under state contract, but they're also going to try a different method where instead of having people live on Zoom, we're actually going to have a call into Zoom, but it's on demand. So anytime people want, they can call in, which is very different from having to make a reservation 2 weeks ahead of time, which was what the previous service was as well. So we're just going to keep trying until we get the perfect fit for us. So right now we've got this, we've got the Iris one that you probably saw somewhere else. They're going to help us out with in-person when you need like a live person there. And then we also have global translators that are doing the phone service for regular parent contact.
All right.
And I will be back with an amendment to this one, but this is just what we could put for now.
All right. Thank you. Comments or questions? I had none. So thank you very much. We'll move on to 5.12, an agreement with Custom Aquatics for work done at Martinez School. Mr. Lean?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Excuse my voice. My last 2 weeks vacation, not vacation, but military duty, the travel and the living environment left me a little under the weather. So, excuse my voice. This is a request for agreement with CT Custom Aquatics to complete the additional repairs and installation of equipment at Conti Pool to get that pool fully up and running. I know that there has been some discussion over the last couple of weeks regarding this particular pool, as well as Martinez, and some confusion by some documents that were submitted to the board previously. But just to make sure that things are clear, this is submitting the proposal for all the work that has not been done and some additional work that has been identified for each individual pool. So for this particular one having to do with Martinez, it's going to be 67,000 and change. I'm sorry. Let me just make sure I have the right document up. So many of them. Yes, it's going to be $327. There will be one correction. There was an oversight for the funding source. We'll have that corrected before the board meeting. This is not going to be funded through capital projects. This is going to be funded through our ESSER carryover. Pending your questions.
All right, comments or questions? So my questions are and I sent them ahead of time. I don't know if you were able to receive them or not, but so basically I think the concerns for this and for the Conti pool are in kind of two categories. One is you just want to make sure we're not paying twice for the same work. And then also, are there delays on the district side or the vendor's side, which is increasing our costs? So from what I understand from what you just said, this is for the work to complete the pool work at Martinez that has not yet been done. So the board did approve last, I think for this one in January, some work to happen. So I think probably the easiest way forward is to have a memo prepared for this and for the next one that just says, this is what was done previously, and this is what's going to be done now. And I would assume that there'll be a request to see actual invoices for the work that was done previously. I think that might be the easiest way forward, just to kind of say that this is what's happening, this is what happened, this is what is going to be happening. To just lay it out there.
Understood and agreed, Mr. Wilcox. We'll make that happen.
And so that would be for this one and for the Conti one. And then my questions, my suggestion for that memo is just to address if there's cost increases just as to what they're for, because there is some differences between what was done before and what's happening now, especially with the Conti pool. Looks like the scope is increased, more work has been identified that needs to be done. So just something that kind of lays that out. And then my other question is, when this work for this Martinez pool work, when this is complete, will this pool reopen?
As I understand, this will complete all the repairs and install the necessary equipment to open the pool up for whatever season it's going to be when we're complete.
And so that's because if I remember right, that part is making sure all the chemicals are all in the right standards and everything. So when this is done, they're going to get their pool back.
That's correct. We're going to install new feeders and they're going to do the chemical balancing for the pools.
Okay. And my request for that memo is that it also includes the target time frame where this will be open. Understanding that can change, but if it's like, will this work be done in December, January, tomorrow? I have no idea. But if it could just be like for this particular pool, like what month do you think it will reopen?
Understood, Mr. Wilcox. Now that we're moving this through the process, I can discuss with the vendor when they make it their PO, and that'll give me more of a better timeline or an understanding of what kind of timeline we're working with here once the PO is issued. Okay.
Because I know we're keen to have these pools open, but we're also keen to make sure that we're not paying extra for work, and also just trying to understand, because it is a little confusing where we had work previously done. So, and what was the nature of the delays on the project?
So when I picked up the project, post COO and project manager being on leave, I walked the project with the vendor to understand what the current state was. We identified that there were items, especially for the Conti pool, that needed to be done that were not part of the original scope of work. We then had to sit down and talk with the team that controls the ARP ESSER funding to find out if we had the additional funds to actually do the work under ARP ESSER, and if not, can we cover it under some other funding source? So identifying the work that needed to be done, getting the quotes redone, being able to explain this to folks to understand, okay, what did we pay for, right, or not pay for, what was done with approval, and then just following the tracks and understanding, okay, this is where it needs to get in order for us to have a pool that can actually open, and then being able to propose that to the CEO office and to the folks that run the special funding, and finally get approval, and then submit those documents to F&O, and that's what took so much time.
Okay. So I think a memo that explains it, and then just a copy of the invoices for the work, any work that's happened on this that we paid for, I'm hoping will provide the information people need to make their decisions. I'm hoping if anybody has any comments or questions related to this, that they get the questions to the committee and to Dr. Negron so that they can help inform this, so that it is a comprehensive memo that's addressing the issues and questions. So, is there hearing nothing else on this item? Let's talk about the next one, which is 513, which is with the same vendor, but for the Conti West Hills pool.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Yes, this is a request for agreement with CT Custom Aquatics to complete the repairs, upgrades, and installation of equipment over at Conti Pool to get that pool up and running 100%, in the amount of $112,585. Again, there was an oversight on the funding source for this one as well. We'll get that corrected before the board. This is actually going to be funded through ARP ESSER, not capital projects. Pending your questions.
All right, comments or questions? And as we've already said, it's the same for this as it was for the previous.
Yes, sir.
And because this one has changed a fair amount in terms of, looks like more work was found that needs to happen. All right. Let me just check my notes here. All right. I think the committee would be happy to look at the memo ahead of time if you wanted us to take a quick look to see if it addresses the questions as we see them, or any other questions that come in from anybody else. I'd be happy definitely to take a look.
Absolutely.
For Friday. All right, hearing nothing else on this, we'll move on to 514 with Lexia Learning Systems. Ms. Diaz-Valencia.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Whoa, I only have one on here. Usually I have like 37.
Yeah.
Mr. Wilcox. This is a request for an agreement with Lexia Learning Systems to continue and pretty much finish up our early childhood letters work in collaboration or in coherence with the district initiative around the science of reading. Back in the spring, we had an agreement which sort of got 10 of our literacy coaches, early childhood coaches, and early childhood administrators trained to be local facilitators. This professional learning here will then go right into the hands now of the 120 practitioners, so early childhood teachers in our pre-K classrooms. And those local facilitators that were trained in June will now sit side by side with a national facilitator to deliver the training in an effort to create a sustainable plan and build capacity of our internal staff so that in the future, this is kind of something we don't have to do again, and our internal staff will be able to provide this type of training moving forward.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? I had none, so thank you very much. We'll move on to purchase orders 6.1 with Houghton Mifflin. Ms. Tusignant.
Good evening, thank you. This purchase order is for HMH coaches to come into our turnaround schools on a weekly basis. This would be for full days. We had this from January till June last year. This would be from September till December, approximately 14 weeks, 1 day per week for the 4 turnaround schools. This went really well last year. We realized great success in most of the turnaround schools, and the teachers, coaches, and administrators are looking forward to this between now and December, and then we would phase this out and believe that our in-house coaches, our school-based literacy coaches, will be able to take over from here.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? I had none either. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Move on to 6.2, purchase order with Committee for Children. Ms. Jackson?
Sorry about that. So this is an agreement with Committee for Children for what we call Second Step. This is through our Stronger Connections grant that we applied for and obtained. Right now, we know that there's been over 4,100 lessons that have been implemented throughout. Again, Second Step, what it does is really looking at social emotional learning lessons and really being able to help explicitly teach some of the students' skills. So it's a 10 to 15 minute lesson that's provided.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? I had none either. So we'll go on to purchase order under a state contract with the Warehouse Restaurant Supply Store. Mr. Young, or is there anybody else that can speak to this? Let me see here. I think this was pretty straightforward. It was purchased under a state contract. It's to be purchased under a state contract, and it is for combi ovens for the kitchens. Did anyone else on the committee have questions related to this? I had none either, other than I just was kind of curious how many we were buying, but it's not a.
Mr. Wilcox, I'll check with Mr. Young and get back to you on that.
Yeah, I just was kind of curious as to how many we were buying, and or is this like a complete replacing, or is this typical we replace so many per year, and just kind of was curious about that and the unit costs, and so it's just that basic question, but I don't think it's something that holds it up from going forward to the board, but I would appreciate it if we could just get an answer maybe by, Thursday or Friday of this week.
Yeah, Mr. Young did state they're doing more cooking than, so these small ovens help.
That sounds good. All right. So let's move on to 6.4, which is purchase order under a contract with CDW Government. Mr. Brown, or yeah, there you
are. Good evening. This is for renewal for years 24-25 to provide the Google Workspace environment for the students and staff.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? Yeah, I thought this was pretty straightforward. Thank you. Move on to 6.5, purchase order with under state contract with Mutual Link. Mr. Simeon or Mr. Brown?
Yeah, I could speak with that one as well. This was for a emergency response system that was used. It predates myself. I understand it was an evaluation period for a year, and the balance was for 23,000, and we're just going to put that through capital.
Okay, comments or questions? And so my question was, this is listed as a 90-day evaluation period. And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so that it's listed as a 90-day evaluation period. And I guess my questions were, what's in place now? What do we do now for these kinds of services.
I'm not certain if it will be continuing, but I would under the impression from the documentation that this is set up for the year and there'll be a continuation of it. So I believe this is to pay for the year. So maybe the 90-day evaluation was to get it set up and test it out, but it's going to be for the year.
Okay. I'm just looking at the documentation again here. So I'm looking the last page of the documentation, page does say that this is a 90-day pilot. But I'm seeing now the date on this quote is December 2023. And it was for 23,000. And it was for, it doesn't say, yeah, it's for Hill Career. So I guess my question is, this is listed as a pilot, but it also sounds like it could be for the year. It sounds like we did a pilot, so I'm just confused on this one.
I can go back and try to collect more information for it. Again, it predates myself, and I'm not 100% sure to speak on it.
Okay, and the other thing I'm noticing now is also the effective dates. This is for more than a year. So I think there's just some questions on this one. Mr. Carter, what is the implications of this not going forward at this time? And I see your hand, Dr. Negron.
Right. So what I wanted to share, if I'm trying to recollect, there was a pilot going on. It had to do with the ability to be able to connect, I believe, with the police station in the events of like emergencies. And I know that the pilot entailed Hill Regional Career High School. I believe Dr. Finley, or former chief of staff, was involved with it, but we are going to have to do a lot of digging. I do know that they were still waiting for us to pay for the pilot. So I know that that was the $24,000 that is coming before us, because I know they've been waiting for quite a bit for us to pay for that pilot.
Oh, okay. Well, there's just some questions here because, is this, from what you're saying now, it sounds like this might be to pay for a pilot that was evaluated maybe in the spring. And I'm kind of curious as to, I didn't do a search to see if we had a previous contract with them. So I don't think this one's ready to move forward, in my opinion. And unless there is some very time-sensitive reason for this where we need to, like, student safety involved, then I'd be willing to move it forward just with the idea that we get the information this week or we pull it at the board meeting. But it sounds like there's just some basic questions. So, and it sounds like from the administration standpoint, it's okay to get the answers to the question and wait till the next Finance and Operations Committee meeting.
Yeah, I do not believe there's anything urgent writing on it unless Chris Brown knows something differently.
I don't know if there's anything urgent on it either. I was going to just maybe point out, like what Dr. Negron mentioned, and that this is something that is for something that had already happened, and the people that were involved to help set it up aren't available. So as much as I want to do the research, I'm not sure which direction I'll go to get the answers for this. But
I think there's a meeting this week about it. Chief Reddish is back, and I think it's slated for Wednesday, so we'll have some more information.
This would sit with security then?
Yes, this this does sit with security as well as with the citywide safety task force for the schools. That was where this started with. So we'll work with Ms. Rush Kittle as well to get clarity on where we stand, and the chief.
Would they be able to speak on?
Yes, they should be able to both speak about it.
I think it would be good, and then it also would help maybe address questions if this is moving forward. Is this something that's going to get rolled out more widely in other schools or et cetera? So, all right. Well, barring objection from the committee, when I make the motion to move forward, I will not include this one at this time, and we'll get the answers. Thanks for everybody pulling together the information. I know it's challenging when a lot of the people that set stuff up are no longer, or at least are not in this meeting. So, all right. Hearing nothing else on that, let's keep moving, and we'll go to 6.6, which is the purchase order under state contract with Syracuse Moving. Mr. Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Request for purchase order for moving services. Procuring through state contract. We originally were using the city contract for this each year. We found that this particular vendor under state contract is actually cheaper than the city contract, and requested approval from purchasing to utilize the city contract in lieu of the city contract, and received approval for that. So requesting a approval for purchase order for $45,000 for on-call services for moving. The moving services are used throughout the district to move furniture, to relocate teachers, anything that's needed. It's normally coordinated through the facilities department, and we use this moving services for that because we do not have resources in-house to move things. Any questions?
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? All right, I had no questions. I know just from my own experience, if you have people that aren't good at moving, they create more issues than they solve by moving your stuff. So having people do this in an organized fashion, I've been part of moves where we didn't have things like this in place and it goes poorly. Thank you. So we'll move on to 6.7, which is auto parts and services. Mr. Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. This is a purchase order requesting $24,000 for auto parts and services. Who is our chosen or awarded contract for our vehicle fleet services? We're just awaiting the excuse me, the RFC process to complete, and requesting this $24,000 in the meantime. The $24,000 will come off the same budget line as the contract, and therefore we are not asking for additional money. This money will be subtracted for the amount that was awarded as part of the contract, and so we won't be spending any additional money as a result of this request. Just requesting funds now so we can start repairing now while we wait for the RFC process to work its course. Any of your questions?
Comments or questions? My question is the same for each of these. For 6.7, 8, and 9 is just what's the nature of the delays in getting these done so that we're not having to do these partials.
So we're going to have to talk about how we're going to handle the internal process here. Even though some of these contracts were awarded prior to the end of the prior fiscal year, the process, according to our accountant and according to purchasing, is that the VOT system, which is where these RFCs get entered, they cannot be done until July 1st of the new fiscal year. So once they're entered on July 1st or any time after July 1st, it has to go through that RFC process, which takes several weeks. We are competing with the rest of the city that uses the same 3 personnel inside the purchasing department, as well as the same folks in corporate counsel. And so the same CEO office, which an appointment has to be made for each vendor. So that process takes several weeks. And therefore, in the first couple of weeks of July and August, it is impossible to have contracts executed and ready to go. And this is the only thing that we can do outside of requesting a PO for the eaches, which is what purchasing asked us not to do, because that requires more people time right? Entering information and processing purchase order for eaches. The recommendation was to do a bulk purchase order that would carry us through a certain period of time with hopes that the contract would be in place and executed prior to us needing additional funds.
Jamal, this is Mike. Should
Yes.
we, in the past, didn't we have multi-year contracts with this?
In the past, we did, but these contracts, even though they're a multi-year, I wouldn't say multi-year. We have options to renew, and that process is still the same, right? So each year we still have to request to award that renewal option, and it still has to be entered after July 1st. So we may have to take a look at a different process going forward, maybe discussing that with the city purchasing department, finding out what we could do to alleviate this problem in the first 90 days of the new fiscal year. But that's the bigger issue right now. Outside of maybe not having enough understanding of capital funding and what projects or what contracts you want to put in place, which is something we're still discussing. Even the ones that we have chosen and awarded, they still have to follow that same process and that same timeline.
Okay. All right, I don't have any other additional questions on this one. And if there's something you need from this committee or from the board to help these processes along, please let me know. So hearing nothing else on this, we'll move on to 6.8, which is with Amazon Landscaping.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wilcox. This is very similar, requesting $24,000 as an initial PO while we wait the RFC process to go through its course for landscaping services with Amazon, so that we can begin using some landscaping services as we await the contract to be executed. Any of your questions?
All right, comments or questions from the committee? I'll just say that there was expressed in the last full board meeting some complaints about the appearance of the schools in terms of landscaping. So I think that it's good that we get this going again, but then also there's been my understanding of the complaints was that it goes beyond just from the beginning of the fiscal year to now, but in general. So some complaints around landscaping around the schools. And I don't know if it's this vendor or additional vendor that we have in place, or if there's any internal work happening on landscaping, but.
Yeah, also we had to have the appropriate funding so we can keep the vendor on a regular cycle every 2 to 3 weeks. When you stop for 4 to 6 weeks, so we're gonna do a better job of funding the cycle.
Okay. And yeah, so it's my understanding, the nature of the complaints is, yes, it hasn't been great in the last several weeks, but it wasn't that great before in some folks' estimation. So I think that, and obviously the look and appearance of the school, as we all know, if it's looks shabby, people assume it's shabby or whatever. So I'm glad we're getting this taken care of, and maybe just pass along to the landscaping companies that, we appreciate a really good job being done. And
So,
also that there's some follow-up from you all that the work is being completed into a good standard as outlined in the contracts.
Mr. Wilcox, just so for the community's understanding, it's an on-call service, right? So they do service as we request it, and they will perform the services that we request. If we want additional services such as beautification, maybe digging out some, growing grass in the curbs, cutting down certain weeds in certain areas, and something just beyond grass cutting and a little bit of trimming, then that's a service that we can request. But again, the budget has to be able to support that. And that, again, that's the same budget line for snow removal, right? So usually there is a balance where we say don't spend too much on the grass cutting because we may need the money for snow removal. And then maybe after the winter season, we may have enough money left over to do more cuts in the summertime. It's a balance game that we play. And it has to do with the amount of money that's available inside the budget. And if we want to do more beautification for the schools, we're going to have to budget for it because it's currently not there.
Thank you for raising that point, and I'm in full agreement with it. We see it across the budget in every single category. If we want to have a sufficient number of social workers, school psychologists, language teachers, we don't have the funding for that. And if we want to have not only get the grass cut, but the beautification projects and having our school locations stand out like maybe a private school location, we need to fund that as well. It's across the board, and often the operations side gets trimmed, so to speak, in favor of the academic side, which is, I think, the way it probably needs to be. But yeah, it's going to be important as we move forward. And if I remember correctly, we have coming up at some point a stand-in on our discussion calendar where we're going to try to identify what the gap is on the facilities and operations side, similar to how we've done with the staffing side, so that we can see, just using this example here, what would sufficient landscaping require costs, so that we could then try to seek the funding for it. I don't remember when that's coming up, but sometime in the next month or 3. Finally is purchase order with Connecticut Controls. Mr. Lean.
All right, thank
6.9.
Yes, I see it here. Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Along the same lines here, CT Controls was awarded a contract for $360,000 as we're waiting for the RFC process to go through. Obviously, we are heavily inundated with HVAC problems throughout the summertime. A large part of that has to do with the controls, and we're requesting $24,000 of that $360,000 to utilize now while that RFC goes through its approval process and execution process, so that we can continue to address the problems as they come in. Any of your questions?
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? All right, I'm hearing none, so thank you for that. I'm going to go ahead and make the motion. And so removing 6.5, which was the mutual link where there's still some questions, I move that we send to the board with a recommendation to approve the remaining 8 purchase orders, the 14 agreements, the 1 memorandum of understanding, and the 3 abstracts.
Second.
It's been seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. President Rivera?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well, so that motion passes. I will say that also in the chat, Mr. Carter has provided a little bit of information about the warehouse restaurant supply store item where we had questions. He's already got answers. It's for the purchase of 8 replacement units at $18,800 apiece, as well as for cooking at, was it Booker T. Washington and Hamden and St. Martin de Porres? And is there 2 things? One is my request is that this gets added to the cover memo when it gets posted with the board materials. Just makes it easier. And then also a reminder of the reason why we're doing equipment for Booker T and for St. Martin de Porres.
I think we have students going there, but I'll verify.
Okay, so if that could just be added to the verified and then added to the cover memo for posting on Friday, that would be great. But thank you for already getting a big chunk of the answer already. All right, we'll move into the discussion items. The first of which is an update on the menstrual products in school restrooms, which is a mandate from the state on having products starting in September. Mr. Carter?
Okay. If I may, Dr. White, can you either Pat pull up the presentation from the diaper bank?
Yes, give me a minute.
Well, I'll give you a little background. I get when the mandate was created, there was a proposal for $400,000 to provide dispensers and product in bathrooms for grades 3 through 12. The COO was to find funding. There was no funding to be found. Luckily, I reached out to the state. I couldn't get who I wanted to, but I talked to a representative who referred me to the Dapper Bank. They were funded 1.95 million in 2022 ARPA funds, and they're helping Bridgeport, Hartford, New Haven, and many communities. We had a call a couple weeks ago, and they have sent us a form to fill out so that we can get the appropriate dispensers and our products. I don't know how expensive, well, the dispensers are pretty expensive, like $350 a piece, but my recommendation, if we don't have enough money from the Dapper Bank, that we put permanent units on the first floor bathrooms. Of course, this is subject to negotiation, and just baskets in the second or third floor girls' bathroom and one in a boys' bathroom. Can you?
Unfortunately, I couldn't find the presentation. Is it attached?
Yes, I had Selena attach it, yeah.
It is posted with this item 8.1 on the in board docs.
Okay.
So I talked to a state representative who talked to another state representative, talked to a congressperson who said they know that cities will not have the immediate funding. So the Dapper Bank is an alternative till they find other funding to help communities like New Haven and Bridgeport. Bridgeport, I talked to their person, and they initially was not going to do it, but thanks to the Dapper Bank, they will be able to implement this program. Paul, can you go to the next slide, next steps? This is the group that's helping us. And go down to the timeline. I think it's further up.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Keep going.
Yeah, it's it might be the third slide up. All right, well, okay. Keep going down. Let's see. This talks about the funding. The Dapper Bank will provide product, shipping and delivery, and as well as dispenser, as well as program evaluation. They will not supply the wall units, but they will supply other dispensers that we could utilize. They will, they have a timeline, and the timeline is that they will ship orders to schools in September once we go register, put all the information in, and they will ship product to schools in October. We suggested that the products don't go directly to the schools, they come to a central holding station in New Haven, and we will work with facilities to get those out to the schools, as well as the Dapper Bank will send quarterly replacements, quarterly supplies. The challenge is going to be to find out what the gap or the delta is, to see if we can find internal funds, or if not, whether or not the state will give funds to the health department to assist us in this effort. But I was able to find funding, but it was not enough to get everything established before September 1. We will be putting our order in, and product will be in October.
All right. Thank you for that. Are there comments or questions from the committee? So I'll just say, so the presentation does kind of have the background. I noticed on the law that was passed in Connecticut for these products. I'm glad the state decided to fund somebody to provide the products. I think that when I went back and looked at things, both the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education and CAPS, Connecticut Association of Professional School Superintendents, 100% on board with this. Both groups made the point of saying, if you fund it. And so I'm glad they're funding somebody, because my understanding is they didn't fund the schools for this. And it was reported to us in March when the district was looking at this, that, as you mentioned also, Mr. Carter, these machines that might be more vandalism proof are a couple $100s a piece, and we have dozens upon dozens of restrooms that would need to have these, and so it was quite a big price tag. So
I have reached out to the group at Yale, and they're on board with the Dapper Bank and what they're going to do for us, and we'll keep them informed. So when we roll out the program, they're behind us and can assist in any ways that we need.
Okay. I still think it would be good, understanding that that there's things in place moving in for October. I think it would be very good if there were some of these products that were available, at least in the schools. We have health clinics, we have school nurses, we have school offices. It's not at the level that the requirements are there for in the restrooms, but at least they're in the buildings. And my understanding from having conversations with various teachers and others, that there are people self-funding this to make sure that there's some products available. So I can't imagine that. I mean, I imagine through our local, where we get other supplies, there might be some of these, some materials available that we could.
I'll reach out again to the health department, because last week I had to reach out to them on the food policy update, and I haven't heard anything back yet, but I will definitely follow up.
And I also request that that this is a topic of conversation with the school principals in the upcoming principals meetings, that we're making sure that people understand what's coming, and that there might be a supply in the meantime that could be distributed, so folks aren't having to self-fund this for the students. 100% on board with this. I'm glad that the Diaper Bank has been funded to help provide some of this, and it sounds like they've been quite helpful. So thank you very much. I had no further questions, and I'm hearing none others. So let's talk about bus pass plans. So my understanding is 175,000 of funding was part of HB 5523 awarded to New Haven and to, I think, Hartford. And so the question is, how is the district going to be handling this? So this is listed as Ms. Bonanno and Ms. Coleman.
Yes, Dr. White, can you share the slide presentation? There we go. Perfect. So you can go to the next slide. So thank you, Mr. Wilcox, for the introduction. So yes, this year, Public Act 24-81, Section 120A6A of the Connecticut State Statute says that the state will provide, as part of its education funding reform, $175,000 to Hartford and New Haven each, to support bus passes. So first off, I'd like to say that in New Haven Public Schools, we have supported bus passes and providing such a service to our students for quite some time. Last year, we spent about $130,000 on bus passes to support our kids. So this is a welcomed grant, and we feel very prepared to implement it. Dr. White, if you can go to the next slide. So what we will utilize, the application that we submitted to the state, we will utilize this funding to support student transportation to and from school. So we refer to that as homeschool home. We will use it to transport students for extracurricular activities in home, to provide transportation from school to employment internship programs, and to provide transportation to area college classes for students who are taking advantage of dual enrollment. So for example, this evening, Dina talked about BioCity. Students will get bused there, but will need to get home from BioCity. And so that is a specific kind of program that we would be using these funds that the state gave us for. If you go to the next page, it shows that we will break up the budget into 2 categories. So what we currently do and what we'll continue to do is provide students with 2-hour bus passes for extracurricular activities. So if you're going to an after-school program or a sporting event and you need to get home, you'll get a 2-hour pass. And then 10-day bus passes for homeschool home. So we have specific schools like Sound School that only uses home bus passes for homeschool home. So we'll continue that practice, but we'll be able to expand it with the additional funds to other high schools around the district. Next slide. So currently we use a sign out process for bus passes. So current high schools who are doing extracurricular activities or have students enrolled in dual enrollment opportunities or places where we have set up the internship or work opportunity for students, they will get those from their main office from a bunch that a high school principal has signed out. Due to this legislation and our hope that we can continue working with our delegation and people around the state who support this, we really want to be very specific in our data collection and really understand, okay, who is taking advantage of this opportunity, how many students are being impacted. So we will be working with the data and research department to set up an electronic data tracking system that helps us to understand which of the students received one of these buses that were funded by this grant, how often they were utilizing that, and the type of service they were receiving. It will also allow us to come up with an amount of money that we invested per student, which we don't necessarily currently have with our practice of just signing them out and leaving it at the discretion of the principal. So that's something that we'll be working specifically with John and data and research to develop. Next slide. So questions.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions? I guess my question is twofold, 2 questions. One is, do you all anticipate that we'll be able to utilize less for student buses because of this extra funding?
I would defer to Ms. Coleman on that one.
Hold on one second. No, sir.
Okay. Because that's part of the challenge. I mean, some folks think that if we have these passes, we could then use less buses, but the nature of it is, my understanding is that it's it'd be very difficult to replace all of a bus route by city buses because of the buses per student goes to many more places than the standard bus routes that CT Transit has.
No,
I mean,
go ahead, Michelle.
Just to that point, Mr. Wilcox, I think people don't understand that some of our students would have to change buses multiple times to take a CT Transit. So they would have to go downtown from their neighborhood and then do a transfer to a stop that would be there, or they'd have to get to the train station in New Haven. There are only certain areas of town where transfers can happen. And so depending on where students are coming from throughout the city, you know, that would be a hardship for many to do that.
Okay. Understood. The other thing is that I think the plan, personally, I think the plan makes sense. I mean, as you pointed out, you all have been doing this anyways for several years now. I do think that the extra tracking is going to be good because my understanding in this legislation, it was only for this fiscal year.
Correct.
And so if there's a chance of continuing with this increased funding or this funding, being able to show the value of it, I would even add in knowing who's using it and maybe periodically collecting information like, how is this working for you? How does this make your life as a student easier? Are you more likely to get to school because of this? Are you more likely to participate in extracurricular activities? It's kind of the, in addition to the qualitative data, just to prove the values, if we want to try to get this expanded in the state budget for next year. Finally, I would request, this information is kind of board centric, which is and administration centric. a lot of the questions I've received on this are from students. And so I think the only thing is missing from this is a slide for more for student or parent consumption, which would be, how does this work functionally if you wanted to utilize this? So I would envision something, if a student wanted to explore getting some of these bus passes, then how would they do it? Who is identified in each school? So just something that would help a student or parent know what's going to happen, because some would be surprised that there's bus passes available now based on the questions that I've received, because they think, oh, this is great. Like, this has never happened before. We know it's been happening, but it's so that just sounds like there's a message that's not getting to everybody that might be able to utilize this.
It'll help answer some of your climate committee questions as well.
Yes.
Your students involved in saving the planet.
100%. The students involved in the climate action group are the ones I'm hearing the questions on. But also, I mean, I've heard from others too that, that they use this, and so. All right. Well, I don't have anything further, and I think with just an addition to the presentation before it's posted for the full board that just says this is how one would utilize it.
Wonderful.
We can put that together.
All right. Thank you. Hearing nothing else on this, we'll move on to 8.3, which is a workshop planning for procurement and contracting procedures. And so the background on this is, I think it was mentioned in this meeting, our last meeting, that maybe some sort of workshop would be good. At the full board meeting, the mayor also brought up that maybe what we need is to have kind of a workshop for how contracting and procurement works in the district, how it connects to the city processes, what fail-safes are in place. So the committee's been tasked to pull together a outline of what this would look like, so that we could start to have the conversations with the procurement folks on the city side. That might also include, you know, the corporation counsel's office or whomever. So I guess the action item here is, if you want to have an input into this, please let myself know. Dr. Negron and Ms. DeMayo, I guess, is a good collecting point. I'm going to be pulling together an outline to start this with, but if there's particular questions like, why does this happen? How does this happen? We'd be very interested to hear about this. I don't think we have a timeline for this, but I think the goal is to do it sooner than later. Like, I'm in the next couple weeks to have some sort of board workshop, which would also be open to the public. Don't know if it'd be virtual or if it'd be attached to a regular board meeting. So if you have any input on this, please let us know, because we're going to be pulling this together. We want it to be useful. Any comments or questions on this? All right. And then finally, the procurement policy update. If we could just get an update as to where things are. I know there were some meetings that were going to be happening. There were some vacation conflicts, but I'm wondering if we have a renewed timeline as to when we'll be ready to vote on this item.
Mr. Wilcox, is that the city procurement policy?
This is the board's procurement policy, which has to relate very tightly to the city's policies. But it's specifically, I'm blanking on the number. It's a 3000 series policy. The board originally updated it in 2020, and it's in need of another update, and the groups have been working on it. Ms. DeMayo, and then Attorney Alexiadis.
Mr. Wilcox, so we're going to pull together another meeting internally with staff to go over some areas that we want to talk with the larger group about. And so that'll be happening in before the next finance and operations meeting. And I don't know how that ties into Attorney Alexiadis' meeting. You were looking to schedule something with the larger group?
Well, I'm still waiting on comments on the last draft, so I really have nothing to report until I get those comments and then can schedule a sub meeting.
Okay. And the draft was posted in the previous meeting materials. I think it was posted.
Yes.
So that's the draft where you are looking for comments specifically about the current draft.
Yes.
Make a note to look at this again. All right, I'm going to be looking at this and I will get my comments to you by, I think, Thursday of this week is a reasonable time frame for my ability to do that. So I'm going to commit to doing that, Attorney Alexiadis,
Thank you.
to help this along.
I know that
Happy to be part of any meeting that I'd be useful in so that we could help. We need to nail this down.
and
I think it would
Mr.
also connect to the procurement workshop that we're planning, since I think that'll be be a big piece of it. Is this is how it is in connection to the policy.
Agreed. I would note that I'm going to be away next week, so I would not expect we're looking at the first week of September before we can probably have a meeting on it.
Okay. All right. I think just on the district side, now's the time to get this nailed down. So you all have to live with it. So we're very interested in anything, the big giant things like, wait, this will stop work from happening. This is going to be a big issue, or questions about, can you explain why this is needed? Those are the things we need to really nail down.
Yeah, and if I may, and the idea is to provide clarity for everyone involved as to what is the correct procedure, and make sure that city side and Board of Ed side are all on the same page, which is also the goal of the workshop.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm hearing nothing else on this item. So if we want to get it done, we should probably comment on it. Okay. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I will second it. We'll go ahead and vote. President Rivera?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Night.